Dear friends, as with nearly every passage in the Gospel of John, the Gospel reading for today uses simple vocabulary that's filled with big theological ideas. It sounds simple, but it's actually deep and full of meaning beyond the simple words themselves. Simple vocabulary is one of the trademarks of John's Gospel, but those simple words and thoughts are packed with theological power. The words of John's gospel, much like the Christ he describes, seem so simple, yet behind these words are life-giving and profound, almost beyond description ideals that are the foundation of our Christian faith. Things like new life, like resurrection. In the reading for today, we encounter several simple words. Some of them are these: see, our, glorify, and the reference of Jesus to being lifted up. Each of these words renew some of the gospel's earlier themes, but they also move the story of Jesus forward toward its conclusion, to what he calls his hour, the cross itself, where his glory, as well as that of the Father, are revealed for all to see. In the first part of today's reading, a group of people who live outside of Israel come to a disciple and they say, "We want to see Jesus." But in John, seeing and hearing too are more than just seeing and hearing. Seeing and hearing are ways that people come to know Jesus, to believe in Jesus, or to trust in him. Seeing and hearing are ways that people recognize Christ's unity with the Father and their singleness of purpose. Recall how when Christ first called Andrew, he invited him to come and see. That was an invitation to faith, to discipleship, to belief. Come and see. I'll note that the people in today's reading who have come to see Jesus were Greeks, and they may have come to Philip because he and Andrew were from a region in Galilee that bordered the Gentile territories. The implication, however, is that other people were coming to see Jesus too. Just a verse before our reading, some of the Pharisees complained that the whole world has gone after Jesus. Greeks, as well as Galileans and Judeans, all wanted to see and by implication believe in Jesus. That's the kind of thing that would get Jesus killed. The hour has come. That's the kind of thing that would get Jesus killed. Incidentally, we don't hear whether the Greeks actually get to see Jesus. We don't hear what happens if they get to talk to Jesus and what Jesus said or did with them. Instead, the story rolls right along, and Jesus speaks of his death because his hour has now come. He told people 3 times already in John's gospel that his hour had not yet come. 2 of those times he said that in reference to his opponents who were trying to do him harm. The opponents couldn't harm him until his hour had come. And now is that time. His hour has come. The rest of the story, until Jesus' arrest and his trial, will have an urgency about it, as Jesus tells his disciples as much as they can bear concerning his death and also the coming of his Spirit. Jesus tells Andrew and Philip that a seed has to die for it to bear much fruit. Bearing fruit, Jesus explained, means losing one's life. As if to make the point even more, Jesus rejected a Gethsemane-like prayer. "What should I say?" he asked. "Father, save me from this hour?" No. Instead, Jesus asked something else. Father, he prayed, glorify your name. And after he said that, the voice came from heaven. In answer to that prayer, I have glorified it, and I will glorify it again. The connection between Jesus and the Father is eternal and steadfast, even as the hour of his death approaches. Father and Son are united. They are always on the same page in John's Gospel. Everything they say or do leads to ultimate glory. Jesus and the Father are always on the same page. If you've seen one, Jesus says, you've seen and know the other. One of my best New Testament teachers used to say that the glory of each is the love that they share. Always on the same page and together they're glorified. The love shared by Jesus and the Father is the same love that Jesus shared as he washed the disciples' feet, the same love that he showed as he laid down his life for his friends. That same love is revealed as, lifted up, Jesus draws all people to himself. Like I said, simple ideas in John's Gospel have much more behind them. But there's a problem, not just here, but elsewhere in John's Gospel. The problem is that few people have ears to hear. Few people have eyes that see. In the passage today, people think that the voice of God is thunder, or maybe they think it could be an angel. They did not recognize it as the unmediated voice of God. Since they didn't recognize the voice, they also didn't know that it was all for their benefit. What that unrecognized voice, the Father, was bearing witness to was the Son. The Father was bearing witness to the Son. Usually, in the story of the gospel, it is Jesus that bears witness to the Father. Here, the Father bears witness to the Son, yet they are each on the same page. Friends, don't miss the important witness of the Father in this reading today. Jesus and the Father are always on the same page, even as they bear witness to one another. Jesus talks about being lifted up in our gospel today. He did also just a week ago in the Gospel from John, where he referred to himself as the serpent Moses lifted up on the stake. He said, as the Son of Man is lifted up like the serpent on the stick that Moses lifted up in the desert. Here again, in today's Gospel, we hear Jesus talk about being lifted up, and that means his crucifixion. Jesus and the Father also share hope that even if people don't see Jesus for who he is yet, they will recognize him soon. They will recognize Jesus when he's lifted up. That is a hope that is shared by Jesus and the Father. Jesus will be lifted up. He will be glorified again when he will be killed. As the result of his crucifixion, being lifted up on a cross, and his resurrection, being lifted up from death, and his ascension, being lifted up from earth to return to the Father, people will see that he and the Father were always one. Questions about who Jesus is, where he has come from, and with what authority he speaks will be answered. Jesus holds out hope that these events will reveal him to those who could not before recognize him as the only Son of the Father, whose eyes could not see, whose ears could not hear, and that by recognizing him, finally they will come to believe. That is what John wants his readers to understand about Jesus, and even in the story we see that unfold. John lets us know that Jesus was right. They remembered, John wrote of these disciples, After Jesus was raised, after he was glorified, the disciples could see even more of who he was and what he had been doing all along. The end of the story helped them see what they had been looking at all the time. Us readers get that same experience as we hear this story from John's Gospel. Through the words of John's Gospel and the words of this sermon, I pray that you will see. That you will see in the sense of believing that Jesus is the Son, the Messiah, and that by believing you will have life in his name, eternal life, the kind of life he spoke about in John 3:16, that belief in him will bring about life in his name, eternal life. May all of us be on the same page as Jesus and the Father. That's the page where Jesus is lifted up and we are raised up with him. The promise of Easter. Thanks be to God.